Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Michael Batnick, and today on Talking Wealth, I'm joined by Justin Fitzpatrick. Justin is the co-founder and president of Incumbent, a platform that's rethinking retirement income planning for advisors and their clients. Justin's work sits at the intersection of technology, behavioral finance, and real-world retirement challenges, helping advisors deliver smarter, more adaptive plans that reflect the realities of longevity, market shifts, and spending patterns. Today, we're going to dive into how Income Lab is changing the way advisors think about retirement planning, what makes their approach different, and where he sees the industry heading next. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's show is sponsored by Innovator ETFs. Innovator is expanding upon the world's first dual directional ETFs with a listing of DDFO and DDTO. These ETFs allow investors to make money in both positive and negative markets. Innovator is offering both a 10% inverse and a 15% inverse version. For the 10%, if the market is down 10%, you would be up 10 at maturity, not just flat. You also get 1-to-1 to the upside, up to a cap. How would you like to make money when others are losing it? A strategy that's racked up billions in the structured product wrapper will now be available in an ETF. How has this not been done before? Find out more by clicking the link in the show notes. All right, Justin, welcome. Excited for you to be here. Thank you for doing this.
Michael, thank you. Excited to be here.
All right, so you've got a beard like Grizzly Adams. This is not your first job. I'm guessing you didn't just graduate college. How did you start Income Lab? What's your background?
There is a little gray in the beard. I'm actually an academic by training. So I did a PhD at MIT, spent some time in academia as a professor. And that's still, an area of love for me, kind of the research world, trying to figure out how things work. And it just turns out that retirement income planning is really interesting. It's really hard. There's actually a ton of academics who've looked at it, from big names like Bill Sharp and Bob Merton. Bill Sharp, I think, has an entire, fat tome on retirement income planning, if you can get through it. And then there's tons of great research by practitioners. So it's just a really interesting area to work on, partly because it's hard and partly because it's super important. I mean, it's probably, 70, 80, 90% of what people really want from financial planning is to understand, hey, what can I afford to spend? What should I do? What should I do next? Where's my next turn? And so it's just a passion for me.
Yeah, my friend Allison Schrager worked with Bob Merton. I think it was Bob Merton, and he said that retirement is like the nastiest problem to solve, like retirement spending specifically. And it's interesting coming from the world of academia, where a lot of it is quantitative in nature, right? You're looking at data, but I feel like so much of, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't so much of retirement spending, retirement planning, like behavioral and psychological based, as opposed to just raw numbers?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, and this might be true in other parts of planning too. But we can think of, as advisors, especially maybe a little more quant-oriented advisors, that, if you just kind of do the math right and then show somebody a graph, then it's all solved.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
No, we're real humans, and so there's a lot of challenges that people hit at retirement. Not the least of which, we're used to saving, not spending, and so you get very comfortable spending your wages. Spending assets that you've been saving for a long time is really hard. So although there is a problem broadly of a population that maybe is undersaved, is going to have tough time retiring and having money to live on, the other problem is probably a bigger one for financial advisors, which is a lot of their clients actually have plenty of assets in a sense, and their struggle is going to be finding permission to spend. It's like your muscles, if you haven't been to the gym for a while, you're just going to start to atrophy. Well, that spending muscle, we've never worked on it. Your saving muscle is probably pretty good,
Justin, speaking of muscles atrophying and not going to the gym, you could see boxes behind me. I'm just moving into my house, and I did get sore. Literally, my hamstrings were sore from moving boxes, which is really embarrassing. So I know all about not using the muscles, and needless to say, the problems that advisors face with having too much money is a great problem. We'll stipulate, obviously, not to be insensitive, but the advisors that are listening to this, I'm sure that they're nodding their head, because we are serving people with assets, and getting them to spend is one of the biggest challenges. Like, I hear that from our advisors consistently, is giving our clients permission to buy the Porsche, permission to buy whatever. It's like, listen, you're 73 years old, with all due respect. What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
You have the money, but you're right. There is a big, big psychological difference between spending money while you're making money and spending money when it's not coming in. And then you work your entire life to build, build, build. And now to see it start to go into reverse is a whole different mindset. So we're going to get into all of how Income Lab is helping advisors with this massive opportunity and problem and challenge. But how did you get hooked up with Johnny? Like, where did the idea for a business come in?
It was, I basically was kind of doing a deep dive on the state of the art in retirement income planning. I just wanted to see, like I said, there's lots of great research. So that's where I began, was just reading, hundreds and hundreds of articles, trying to understand what was going on here, and then doing a deep dive on how an actual advisor could create and deliver advice to real people in the real world.
And what did you find?
Well, basically that the first problem people were solving in financial planning was an accumulation problem, which, if you think about it, makes total sense, because until kind of the late 70s, early 80s, there were not all of these great savings vehicles, IRAs, 401ks, things like that. And so the first problem people had once they got those, which basically early 80s, was, okay, how much should I save? How should I invest it? How should I grow my resources that I'm going to use for retirement? And the use of those resources was decades off, right? So the first thing we did as an industry was solve the problem for, how can we save? How can we give good advice on saving? And then, over the last couple decades, we've had more and more people saying, well, okay, how do I use these things? And so I think that's why there was an opportunity to kind of have, starting from first principles, like how should someone live their life in retirement? And what we found was there wasn't really a good answer for that. Instead, there were these very crude things like probability of success, which is the most commonly used kind of stat out there, that drives pretty bad behavior actually often, and doesn't really give people the confidence or the ability to spend, like we were talking about. And so that's really, it was that deep dive. And then Johnny shared a similar passion for it. We just both found ourselves in a position where we could start something new and go off on an adventure together, and it's been great.
All right, advisors are drowning in tech. It's enough already. We are loath to add more things and more things and more things. That being said, Income Lab is rising in the ranks. Based on every industry report, like, you guys are definitely getting some traction. Why are advisors choosing to work with Income Lab, and how are they working with you?
Yeah, I mean, what you say is true. I mean, I actually view it as a pretty exciting thing. Like, there's finally, I think, wealth tech
you're a nerd, with all due respect.
Well, I think like wealth tech is actually getting the attention it deserves. It's not a really crowded field. But advisors.
Wait, Justin, forgive me. I was just, let me put some meat on the bones, because I was looking for this this data. Where is this from? Is this from Kitsis? I don't know. Sorry, we'll put this on the screen. All right. Comprehensive financial planning software. Number 1 is eMoney. Number 2 is Money Guide Pro. Number 3 is Right Capital. And damn, number 4 is Income Lab. And you guys weren't even on the list in 2022. Like, you weren't around. So you've climbed the ranks really fast in a really short period of time. So back to you before I cut you off. I apologize.
Yeah. No, it's wild. It's totally wild. And really, we did that by focusing first on retirement income planning. And then lately we've kind of added more parts of the life cycle, right? So that you can really use us throughout a client's life. But why do advisors start using Income Lab? It's because of the dissatisfaction with trying to use accumulation-based tools for distribution. So even the very concept that someone would fail in retirement, right? Which is what probability of success suggests. Oh, you got an 80% probability of success. The client immediately does in their head, wait a second, so 20% chance I fail? And you don't tell them what failure means. They know what failure means, right? So that framing, which, by the way, is a choice. That is not like handed down from on high, that's the way you have to do planning. No, that is just a thing somebody came up with at some point. using probability of success, a concept from, Monte Carlo simulations around the atomic bomb. Like, no, that's not how you necessarily have to do it. How do people really live their life? Have you ever met someone who, quote unquote, failed in retirement when they had a bunch of assets they could use?
What do you mean?
No.
They followed the 4% spending rule.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. But right. So that's a good point, though. Like, the other reason is there aren't rules of thumb like 4% rule, right? So advisors want to be able to just answer the basic questions of what can I spend? Here's a classic conversation, which early on when we were building the software, we talked with a lot of advisors. I said, what's a conversation like? I said, well, when I started out, I used to ask people who were about to enter retirement, well, how much would you like to spend? And they'd kind of look at me funny and say, like, well, how much can I have? Right? You've never lived that way before. You didn't go get a job and your new employer said, well, how much would you like to spend? Let me change your salary to match that. No, it's a job. It's got a salary. Maybe there's a little room to move, but and that's what retirement's like too. So just flip it on its head and say, here's what you're eligible for. Again, there's a range depending on your risk tolerance and things like that. But it's not just anything. If you were a school teacher all your life, you're not going to be flying private jets. And so just recognizing that's where you start, and then you're not going to fail. It's about making adjustments. And by the way, it's not just adjustments on the downside, although obviously that's what people care the most about. Hey, in 2022 or in the COVID crash, like, do I need to do anything, right? With Income Lab, our other focus was helping advisors set expectations with clients so that they would know, oh, here's my guardrail. Here's where I would make an adjustment. We heard from a lot of clients that every time something like that happened, they'd ask their advisor, should I do anything? And the advisor would say, no, stay the course, which is probably good advice. But frankly, it smells to clients like the advisor doesn't have a plan. Like, there's no point at which I would recommend any change, right? Which just sounds like kind of fingers crossed, let's hope this works. Setting a client up to say, yeah, you have, $3 million today. If tomorrow we woke up with $2 million, here's what we would do. And it's right there on the screen, dollar amounts. That gives people a lot of confidence that their advisor actually has a plan and it actually kind of makes sense to them. It's a huge change in kind of framing and mindset to go from, okay, I'm going to succeed or fail, to I can spend this much. Here's kind of my next turn if something bad happens.
All right, before we get into the platform, who is this most suitable for? Is it for people that are approaching retirement, people that are in retirement, people that are, a decade or two away? Like, who is the sweet spot for clients?
Yeah, so originally Income Lab was all about people just before, at, and in retirement. And that's basically every baby boomer. We've expanded more and more capabilities to help people who are pre-retirement understand how much they should save, when they could retire. That's the other thing. Sometimes people, they say, oh, I'm going to retire at this point. Well, what if you could show them they could retire a couple of years earlier and do that easily, right? But it is all about, it's in the name, Income Lab. It's all about kind of standard of living. What can you spend? How much should you save? It's all about those kinds of decisions.
Okay. So how does the platform work? What do you do?
So let's take somebody who's just pre-retirement or at retirement, something like that. The first thing to know is, what are the resources that you're going to use to live your life in retirement? And it assumes that your goal as an advisor and a client is to live the best life you can, given the resources you have and the time that you're given. Which I think that's, if you really kind of, drill down to it, you might need to be having a beer with an advisor to do that. But it's like, let's really think philosophically. What are you trying to provide for clients?
Dude, that's not a beer. That's a whiskey.
A whiskey, cigar, right? I'm trying to help them live the best life they can. Financially, right? I mean, there are other things, but if you think about that, what is it? It's time with family and friends. Maybe it is some bucket list items. We have a lot of people who tell us stories of, once they are able to kind of shift the mindset of their clients, the clients start to talk with their kids about, hey, do you want your legacy now? Like, let's do some things together. Or do you want it, decades from now when I'm dead? And people really start to think about, like, what's a good life? Well, how can I use these resources? So that's why we start with resources and then give you an answer. What can I spend? What am I eligible for, given all these parts of my life? And then you kind of build your vision of the future based on that, quote unquote, retirement paycheck. And a lot of times it's a lot more than people thought they could spend, which is fine, by the way. If they don't want to spend more, that's great. They just can at least sleep well knowing that they're spending well within their means. Stop checking your, balances and go live your life. Go take the, grandkids to Disneyland.
How does it work in terms of how much work is there for the advisor or the advisor's para or whatever? Like, are we connecting to the custodians, to Orion, to something else? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's up to you. So we have a lot of integrations that make the work a lot easier. We're actually about to launch some AI tools that will help you just pull in data, whether that's, a Zoom transcript or, your own notes, and just create a plan based on that instead of you having to go and type things in and so on. So that's going to be a huge time saver. I think, Michael, we might have actually just solved data entry with AI, which would be a huge improvement to the advisor and paraplanner experience. So it can, with the AI, it'll take you, a minute of processing. Without it, once you know the system, it's, 15 minutes of data entry to get it in there. But the best thing, because this is about ongoing advice, is to have links to custodians or to, portfolio management software.
When you say it's ongoing advice, how often do you think the advisor and the client are revisiting their spending habits? Is this like an annual type of thing or more or less?
Revisit it as often as your meeting calendar suggests. But what's great about Income Lab is the plans themselves, you set it to be tracked and monitored. And once a month, we update it automatically. So you always know it's up to date when you get in there. And that, what does update mean? Updated balances, but we're walking with you through time, right? You're getting older. Inflation is happening, right? So we'll tap the advisor on the shoulder and say, hey, this family has accumulated, 5% of inflation since they last made an adjustment. And you told us we're going to make inflation adjustments at 5%. Okay, now it's time to do it. Here's the dollar amount. Here's what you do. Change the systematic withdrawal or whatever it is. So we're doing the work a computer honestly should be doing for you and letting you do the work a human should do.
The nightmare scenario, of course, retirement and spending is so path dependent. Retiring in 2007 and then, the bottom falls out. What does Income Lab do in the case where somebody retires and let's just say that their accounts are not overfunded? This is not the person that we spoke about earlier where they're afraid to spend and they're underspending. What happens if somebody has $2 million and it goes down to 1.2 and the plan was to retire with 2 and that's all the money that they're ever going to have and they're spending just the balance doesn't support the spending? And then what happens if a year later the market rebounds? It's like forget, like, I know, and maybe this is why complicated is such a gnarly thing to solve. How does it work?
Yeah, so we actually have examples in the software that you can show the plan running through historical periods. So dot-com bubble, global financial crisis, 70s and 80s stagflation, Great Depression, all that stuff. And you can see, hey, is this the kind of plan that would have taken a pay cut in 2008? If so, how big would the pay cut have been? That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in the future, obviously. But people, getting back to the psychology, people get stories. They get, especially when it's through a period they lived through. And then you can evaluate it. Is this the kind of thing that I would have been comfortable with, making a 5-10% adjustment to my spending? Or do I need a plan that's a little more conservative? So typically what happens there is we'll see if you're aggressive enough, you will have taken a pay cut in 2008. But there are plenty of plans that don't. You can, pull things back. But those pay cuts tend to be relatively small, like I said, in the 5 to 10% range.
So where do they come from? Where do they come from?
Like, how do you make the pay cut?
Yeah, because nobody likes to go backwards. Like, how do you? Is it just like, all right, we're not taking that vacation, or because a lot of like what I mean, I would assume it's discretionary spending gets cut.
Exactly. So, and that's where the advisor who's planning this way, who's planning explicitly this way. I would say all advisors actually will have to plan this way. I mean, where's the failure coming from, right? Are they just gonna like not spend money on their life, right? In the probability of
No.
success world, right? So, right, the discussion needs to be, hey, is this spending? And if it's somebody who really doesn't have flexible spending, all their spending is, property tax and grocery bills, well, we better build a pretty darn solid plan that doesn't give us much chance of adjustments. More often, if it's somebody with more assets, then it's what you said. Hey, let's build some things into the plan that are discretionary. It's big trip to Europe. Well, maybe we put that off for a year. Or maybe it's a US vacation instead. Maybe it's, gifting and charity and things like that. Or maybe it's just, instead of the steakhouse, we go to the brew pub. Often that's all you need to do if you hit we call it the lower guardrail, right? Your accounts are down far enough. It's time to do something. Maybe the plan has $1 million in end of plan legacy bequests. You might say, well, hang on, do we need $1 million? Maybe 500,000 is enough. And by the way, once you change that, you didn't hit a guardrail. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, we can put those bequests back in the plan. So there's a lot of levers someone can pull in a plan, typically. Like I said, if there's some discretion in there.
So Justin, you're on everybody's radar now. I just mentioned that study showing that advisors are now using you behind some of the big boys. They're obviously aware of what you're doing. Are you telling me that this software, this technology, this tool, whatever it is, was not in the incumbents didn't have this? It sounds crazy. Or do they just have a crappy version, or what?
No, the whole concept of adjustments is not. That just wasn't a part of the incumbent idea. Like I said, it was all based around either just kind of straight line appreciation, cash flow graphs and tables, or probability of success, Monte Carlo.
Doesn't that sound wild? It's like, how did this not exist?
Because I think we've thought a lot about this, because you kind of ask yourself, like, well, why do I have this opportunity? Right. This is crazy. I think it is because of the accumulation origin story of financial planning. And so, frankly, probability of success and even straight line appreciation stuff, it's not bad for accumulation. I mean, time value of money, financial calculator, it's not a terrible way to do it if you're saving for the next 30 years. And so they just never saw that it doesn't translate to actually living in retirement.
Do you guys get as granular as where the spending is happening, or is that not it?
I mean, you can do as much or as little budgeting as you want to do in the app. That's another interesting discovery. We thought, because on so many other platforms, you actually have to start with what you spend. Like I said, hey, what do you want to spend? It turns out, actually, most people hate doing budgets. You lived your whole life and nobody was looking over your shoulder. Suddenly having an advisor, getting into exactly what you spend your money on is not always very comfortable.
Wait, sorry to interrupt. Just to pause on this. How do people know what they spend? Because I would imagine most people really have no clue.
No, I mean they may have a ballpark idea. The other thing I've noticed is actually people's gut intuitions are not often wrong. If there's a difference between what they think and what the math says, maybe you're actually missing something. But I mean, it's really just what came in versus what went out. I mean, that's I don't think most people, from what I've seen, they might play around with a mint.com or something like that, but they fall off the horse pretty fast on that. Nobody likes to sit there and track every Starbucks order. So the key is just maybe you look at the last few years of in versus out and get a feel for it.
How are you working with advisors? Are advisors reaching out to you? How are people finding you, and what does the operational hurdle look like? So you do a meeting. How quickly do you get up and running?
I mean, for most people, it's the same day. So they may even just sign up on our website, but I'd say, most people still talk to someone and have a demo, or maybe they just watch a video of a demo. They find us we do a lot of thought leadership. We do webinars or webinar series that get, thousands of people coming to them. So there's a real hunger for this particular area, some new thinking there. And at this point, there's a lot of word of mouth as well.
What are you most excited about that you're working on for the future of Income Lab?
I mean, I'm always excited on the next thing that we're doing, which right now, as I said, is AI. From the beginning, people told us, because we did a lot of this, talking about, well, how's it work? What's What are the pain points? Data entry is the biggest pain point. Like everybody loves talking about, oh, we know we've discovered this is a range of what you could spend. Here's some tweaks we could make. Let's talk about what matters most to you, right? Those are great conversations to have. Nobody likes keying in stuff in software. So we've got 3 new AI features coming to, like I say, and I don't think I'm totally overstating it, to solve data entry. So that's what I'm most excited about, to see how that's received. I think there are going to be some new even use cases that advisors come up with to make things more efficient, make their lives more, fulfilling as advisors. If we can get rid of the boring parts of people's lives and replace it with the stuff that's really meaningful, that's awesome.
Last question, Justin, you come from a world of academia. What's the most challenging aspect of running a startup company?
Oh, man, I don't know that. I guess the most challenging part is just the constant change, the constant like uncertainty in things. But I think that's the reason we did it in a way. Like, I'm just personality wise, I think that's a good match for me. I kind of prefer not to know what's 5 years down the road. It's more fun to sort of live in the moment there.
Same.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Justin, really appreciate your time. For people that want to learn more about the platform, where do we send them?
IncomeLab.io is where you can find all the information about Income Lab.
Awesome. All right, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time.